Welcome back to The Remote Life. My name is Han Talbot, also known as Han Meets World, and today we'll be chatting with Matt Kepnes. Originally from the US, Matt is the founder of travel site Nomadic Matt and the Nomadic Network, as well as a best-selling author and founder of the TravelCon conference. In this episode, we talk about scaling a business, the importance of community and remote life, and things to think about when choosing a remote life destination. So grab a coffee, a tea, or something stronger, and let's get started. Matt, thank you so much for being on the Remote Life podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
So to dive straight on in, to begin, connect the dots for us. How did you get started on your remote life journey?
Like most things that turn out well, it was an accident. I was just traveling around the world on a backpacking trip. I quit my job, took a career break, and then I ran out of money and realized I wanted to go back to Europe. So I needed more money. So I started teaching overseas and Italian talent for a little bit. Came home, was like, all right, well, I don't really like home. Let's go back to Asia. And in that process, I thought I'll create a website that will allow me to sort of be an online resume to try to get freelance writing gigs. At the time, I thought guidebook writer seemed like the coolest job in the world. So I wanted to have a place where editors could find me. So I started my website, Nomadic Matt, sort of originally just an online resume with a blog component. And then I went back to teaching in Asia for a couple of years. And during that time, I really grew the website to allow me to keep traveling full time and earning a living. And then here we are 13 years later.
Here we are today. Yeah, indeed. So tell us a little bit more about your business, kind of what you've got going for you, because you've got a few things going within Nomadic Matt sphere. So
yeah, well, I like to create things. So, I have Nomadic Matt, which is my website that teaches it teaches people how to travel on a budget. We have the Nomadic Network, which is our growing community arm where we host events online and post-COVID in real life to try to create sort of, a social network for travelers. So you can meet like-minded people who won't think you're crazy for wanting to go travel the world for a year. And then we have TravelCon, which is a conference for travel media. And that takes place once a year in the US. That's basically, the major things. I have a charity too called Flight, which raises money to send high school students in the US on overseas educational trips.
Amazing. So speaking of Nomadic Network, who is it for? Apart from, obviously, as you said, the people who think it's not crazy to go traveling for a year. Some great people. Who's Nomadic Network for?
Nomadic Network is really just for travelers who want to meet other travelers and do so in a more offbeat, responsible way. It's not for just one type of traveler. It's really, we have meetups for backpackers and RVers and really just anyone who wants to find other travelers who get their desire to travel long term, to make travel a priority in their life, to want to talk about destinations, and not just go to resorts in Cancun. They want to go to Azerbaijan or do a backpacking trip through Mongolia, or offbeat safaris and things of that nature.
Just out of general interest, bit off topic, but are there kind of more spaces for remote lifers and kind of people who are maybe based in one place but looking to meet kind of more travel people? So within do you find there are a few people who are maybe based in one location that also do meetups or meet up with people in the area?
Through the Nomadic Network?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do a lot of monthly in-person events. They're a little slow right now and not as frequent due to COVID, but we have local chapters around. So it's just not virtual meetups. We do in-person meetups in cities around the world.
That was more for me that I asked that question because I found that some people, even when I'm in certain Facebook groups, for example, there were still people who are locals but looking to meet people who are coming in from town. So just a general personal question for myself. But from a more kind of business perspective, for people kind of looking to scale a business, kind of at what point did you go, right, Nomadic Matt is taking off now and it needs to become something like a Nomadic Network?
A couple of years ago, it's sort of a natural evolution of what I want out of the website. Nomadic Matt is really about me and my travels, and I wanted to grow a business that was not so much tied to me and my brand, where I didn't always have to be on the road, where I didn't always have to be producing content. There was something else that I could take a backseat to. And so, when you have a website called Nomadic Matt, it's very hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's always about you. So creating a community website was the next thing I wanted to do, because I wanted to go into events, I want to go into tours, but I didn't always want to have to be at every event or run every tour. I wanted to have my own life too. So leveraging Nomadic Matt's audience, we built the Nomadic Network.
Out of interest as well, like from your own business kind of experience now, is there anything that you wish you had known when you were starting out before kind of creating this business model, or done differently maybe?
I think, one, I would always tell people, if they want to be an online creator, treat it as a business. Don't expect fame right away. Obviously, sometimes you get lucky in the social media lottery and, you blow up on the internet. But it's always good to think of it as more of a long-term, slow process than I'm going to start a blog or an Instagram or TikTok and get famous real quick and make tons of money. That does happen. That's very rare. The other thing I would tell people to focus on is there are a lot of great creators out there in the world. We're all dimes a dozen. So if you have information you want to share, remember your story is unique. No one else has your perspective. But if everyone's doing it on one medium, try to be on a different medium. For example, like everyone wants to be on TikTok or Instagram, right? But if there's a new social network that comes out, then be the big fish in the small pond, because then you can leverage that audience across your other social networks and bring them over. A lot of people get big on Instagram because they bring their TikTok audience over and vice versa. And another thing I would say is never just stick to your niche. Like if you're in travel, don't feel like you only have to go to travel events or meet travel people. Go to other conferences and niches that are tangentially related to yours. In my example, that would be finance, since I talk about saving money, right? So going to finance bloggers.
Interesting.
People who blog about finance tend to want to save money. Why not be their person for travel? They have podcasts, hey, you want to talk about saving money? I'm an expert in saving money on travel. Have me on your blog or podcast. Then you can expand your audience to a whole new readership, rather than, having to always fight for in the travel space. You sort of go into what they call a blue ocean. Nobody else is there.
Nice.
And then you become the travel guy for that industry, or girl, or travel person.
Yeah. Out of interest, are there any, so you said finance, for example, are there any events that, like pandemic aside, are there any events or communities you specifically go to, or were there any spaces online that you went to first outside of travel?
I really used to love this conference called Blog World. I went there a lot, but that doesn't exist anymore. So Social Media Week is really good. I like that. There's a conference in the States called FinCon, which is financial bloggers. Traffic and Conversion, which is sort of for business marketers. There used to be one called Blog Her, which was for female bloggers. I don't even know if that exists anymore.
Not heard about it in a while.
I mean, I don't go to as many events as I used to, but in the beginning when I was starting out, I went to as many as I could, regardless of what the genre was. I wanted to, podcast movement. That's another big one for podcasters. So just trying to be everywhere to get as many websites or blogs or creators and podcasts to amplify my website.
What's your number one icebreaker when you're at these events?
Oh God, I'm really bad at icebreakers. So usually some awkward joke, but typical like, what do you do? And then like, okay, what do? You get a podcast, like, tell me more. And people just like to talk about like it is, or like, who is the main audience for that? I don't know, really bad with icebreaker stuff. That
seems to be most people's go-to. It's, hi, I'm like so-and-so. Like even Cash, who was in at Series 1, he also did the same. He was like, I go up to people and I go, hi, I'm Cash. I'm a travel blogger, and takes it from there.
Yeah.
So let's just move away from that a little bit. Why should people pick up a copy of your book, 10 Years a Nomad? And maybe can you give us a couple of takeaways from it?
10 Years a Nomad really follows the emotional journey of long-term travel. So if you're wondering what it's like to travel long-term, the highs and the lows, that's what the book is really about.
Nice. Anything, can you give us a little bit of like a one takeaway or?
Well, one of the key takeaways is that long-term travel really forces you out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up learning more about yourself than you do the world. It's a really good way to develop personal skills. It's self-confidence, conversation skills, small talk, learning to like sort of read people and figure out nonverbal cues, because there you are in a country that you've never been and you don't know what they're saying. So you have to kind of pick up on body language. And it gets you really comfortable being uncomfortable, because things are going to go to shit very, very, very often.
On small and big levels. But speaking of being uncomfortable and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, was there anything that you did in the, again, kind of more at the start of your nomadic journey to kind of get you through those times when you're kind of figuring out, okay, what's good uncomfortable and what's not bad, like not good uncomfortable?
I think you always have to trust your gut. There's been times where I'm like, this doesn't feel right, and just go with it and then step back. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And so like usually if you're in situations and something feels off, go with that. Like remove yourself from that situation.
Like for kind of getting yourself through do you have anything extra for like when I'm feeling nervous, but I know that it's good for me? Like, did you have any kind of coping like systems for that at all?
Going with people that can push you is good. So, we tend to not really want to break out of our comfort zone. So it's sort of a growing process, one step at a time. You stay at the hostel, you do that activity that you never thought you'd do before. And slowly but surely you get better at just taking leaps on your own. But that's the great reason why hostels are good, because you're in a group and you go out together and you don't want to be that one person.
So a hostel's more your go-to accommodation thing, because I've read a couple of your articles on your site about Airbnb.
I do love hostels. I stay there quite often. I think they're a really good way to meet people. So if I'm traveling and I'm looking to meet people, I will most likely stay at a hostel. Whereas if I'm traveling for work and I know I'm going to be spending most of my time working, I'll want that private time. And so I'll end up staying more at a hotel or, just a place a little quieter.
What's one thing that you are like, right, I can't live without when I'm on the road, that you always have in your cabin luggage or your hold luggage?
Honestly, my music.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
In a book, I always have a book with me. Nice. Physical book. I don't like reading from an iPad or Kindle. And then I always have my phone just so I can always listen to music.
Okay, very interesting. Any reads that you would recommend particularly for people?
Things I read lately that I really liked is Lost in Planet China by J. Martin Truce, Circe by Madeline Miller, and then The Caliph's House by Tahir Shah.
Cool, nice. So just going back a little bit at sort of the planning process. So you're thinking about looking at traveling and working in a completely new destination. What are the three, for example, say, most important things that you look for?
Weather. Is there a existing community of digital nomads there? And how's the Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that seems to be a common thing. So I was going to ask a question to you about, obviously, the travel industry has been massively impacted in the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on remote lifers, digital nomads, slow travelers, and the potential impact, good/bad, the impact that they could have on tourism as we come out of the pandemic?
In what way? Economically, as a way of spreading tourism?
Yeah. For me, for example, I think that slow travel and digital nomads are going to have a positive impact to an extent, because they are the people at the end of the day that can go base themselves somewhere for extended periods of time. And so therefore they can see more of the country. But in some people's opinion, that might not be true. That might not be the focus. Do you think they could have, you might not have any thoughts on it at all. It's just for the science.
Well, if you take a look at Mexico, they've recently cracked down on digital nomads who come and they live for 6 months and take advantage of that 6-month tourist visa and they stay there. And, there's been some pushback. And I think that is well-deserved pushback because, one of the things people like about being a digital nomad is you can just go live anywhere without having to bear the cost of living there, taxes, all that jazz. And I think there should be more of an awareness of the fact that you are a guest in someone's country. And it's just not like, well, I'm going to drop in and enjoy the perks and then leave when things get bad or whatever, right? So I'm all for these countries starting to offer digital nomad visas that come with, more regulations. I think more countries should offer it. It's very hard. Like if I want to go live in France, like it's nearly impossible. I don't want to be a burden on their system, and I'm happy to pay, taxes or whatever. They just don't have that set up. But like Germany, on the other hand, has that freelancer visa and everyone uses it. And now they're legally part of the system. Everything's above board. So if more countries adopted that, I think there'd be less people that would just be like, well, I'm going to go live here basically illegally. Like tons of people do that in Bali because it probably only offers 30 days. So people, in my opinion, wrongly try to get around the system. But I think countries, if they adopted to the times more and made it easier for people to have long-term visas while also not looking for work, I think it would drive revenue for them. They get a free fee and drive taxes, and we all get to live a place without any worries of being caught,
Yeah, there's been quite a few nomad visas that have surfaced out of the last couple of years. Are there any destinations that have brought out visas that you're particularly excited about?
Greece has one, Croatia has one. I think Mexico has done one. But I wish countries like Indonesia did one, Australia, New Zealand, France, Canada. I think every country should have one.
So home is fill in the blank, and why?
Home is wherever I feel the most in sync.
Oh, interesting. Okay. In what?
So, I feel at home in Paris and Bangkok and Tokyo, Austin, New York, wherever the energy of that place sort of aligns with my energy. Sometimes you just, Oaxaca, Mexico, you just get somewhere and I'm going to like this place. And so I can live in any one of those places.
Interesting. Okay. Nice. And an absolute last question. If you were able to go back and start all over again, is there anything that you would have done differently in the earlier days?
Business-wise, I definitely would have started my email list from day one. Okay. I think that's a very common response you'll hear from people because I went years without getting people's email. And, social media networks come and go. And the algorithm is always changing. And so the amount of people that see your content is always changing. So I would have spent more time building up people on my own platform rather than trying to build up a Facebook page that now nobody sees.
Interesting. Amazing. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the Remote Life podcast. It's been very insightful.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Remote Life. And thank you, Matt, for your awesome insights. You can find links to his website and socials below. Tag Matt at Nomadic Matt and myself, Han, at Han Makes World, and let us know where you would love to remote work from. You can also find the podcast on Instagram at The Remote Life Podcast. Thank you so much again for listening, and we can't wait to remote work with you again soon.